It is less than 2 weeks to the provincial election, and we want to hear from all of the Lethbridge candidates. Today we have the incumbent MLA with us, Environment Minister Shannon Phillips, the NDP candidate for Lethbridge West. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you for having me.
So lots of door knocking, thousands of doors here. How's the campaigning been going so far?
Well, you know, people talk to me about a few different things. They talk to me about jobs and diversification. They talk to me about healthcare and education and post-secondary education. I hear a lot about stability in our public services, but people also want to see a plan for the future. That's what they wanted to see in 2015, and they like the progress so far, and they want us to keep continuing with those things.
Now, you're the Environment Minister. Is the carbon tax actually reducing emissions since it was implemented in Alberta in 2017? A lot of small business owners I've spoken to, they have a real problem with this carbon tax, saying, you know, it's just doing a lot of damaging effect to my business and even my home. I know myself, when I received my recent gas bill, it was like $23 in carbon tax, and my bill itself was $43. So what are you hearing from a lot of constituents, specifically a lot of the small business owners?
So our climate leadership plan contains rebates for 65% of Albertans. It also reduces the small business tax by a third. But more than that, it's reducing emissions. We've already reduced emissions by 7 megatons. How much is that? It's a third of the annual emissions of the entire province of Manitoba. We did that in 1 year. We know that we are on track to about 50 megatons of reductions. And that is Alberta essentially reducing the carbon in the barrel, ensuring that we've got natural gas electricity as well as renewables, that we are investing in energy efficiency, where we're creating thousands of new private sector jobs in those areas, that we've got investments in clean technology, and we're helping our oil and gas industry reduce the carbon in the barrel so that they can be competitive for a generation to come. So we are accomplishing all of those objectives, but number one, yes, we are reducing pollution, we're cleaning up the air, and we're doing our part on emissions reductions.
Let me ask you something though, you're Environment Minister. Is it killing you a little bit in the inside, the fact that you have to stick up for pipelines, getting pipelines built?
Absolutely not. Pipelines are key to our success as Albertans and our success as Canadians.
What about damaging the environment?
Look, our pipeline and oil and gas sector is within the context of the climate leadership plan, reducing its impact on the environment. At the same time, we are ensuring that we are attracting new investment, that we are ensuring that Albertans have good paying, mortgage paying jobs, and that we are leading the world in clean technology. And it's exactly that as an energy producer that Alberta should be leading on. And so I'm enormously proud to be able to do that, to ensure that Albertans have good paying jobs, to ensure we get our resources to market. Right now, we do have pipeline delays. We need to hold the federal government to the timelines that they have set out. We need to make sure. Is there any pressure
we can put on the Trudeau Liberals at all? Is there anything we can do?
We have indeed done that. They bought the pipeline.
But still, it's death by delays. Nothing's really happening with it.
Well, we have an NEB approval, and we are now waiting for the final approval, which we assume will be coming very shortly, so that construction can resume. In the meantime, though, what Premier Notley has done is she has ensured that we are getting our product to market. It's not ideal to do it on the rail, but the alternative, as the Conservatives have proposed, is to keep 120,000 barrels per day in the ground. That is not Rachel Notley's approach. Let's get that oil to market. Let's make sure that we can continue to collect those royalties, to keep people employed, to attract investment, and ensure that we are getting those pipelines built. Now, we are in a position where Trans Mountain is almost over the finish line. TransCanada has been guaranteed on Keystone XL 50,000 barrels per day. And we now have an approval on Line 3 as well in Minnesota that just came last week. I traveled to Minnesota to meet with state-level legislators, to meet with the business community there, to make the case for that pipeline. I'm very pleased that it has cleared its state-level regulatory hurdles. That will help, but again, it's still only to the American market.
So they understand the importance as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the work that we've been doing as a government, in addition to pressuring the federal government into buying that pipeline, in addition to making sure that we are advocating for market access in every room that will have us in British Columbia and elsewhere. We have also moved Canadian public opinion. So we're at a position now where we went from 4 in 10 Canadians agreeing with us that we need market access for our products to now 7 in 10 Canadians, including a majority of British Columbians.
Let's talk about healthcare for just a moment here as well, Shannon. 100,000 people here in Lethbridge, 1 cardiologist. NDP's been in power since 2015. I remember with the NDP, it's all about supporting healthcare, attracting specialists, bringing them here. I'm hearing more and more that a lot of doctors and specialists are leaving our region. So what can we do to attract them to come to Lethbridge?
Absolutely.
One cardiologist for 100,000 people. That's not near enough.
I recently met with that cardiologist, and I share those concerns, and so does the government. So we have over the last 3 to 4 years attracted 1,200 doctors and insured 4,000 nurses.
They're not here.
Some of them are. Now, is there more to do? Absolutely, there is. So that we need to make sure that we have stable, predictable funding on the operational side, but also that we're making those capital investments for things like a catheterization lab, which does attract more specialists, not just cardiologists, but other associated specialists. The solution here is not to cut the heart out of the healthcare system by introducing American-style privatization or cutting the budgets. The solution here is stable, predictable investment into our healthcare system, which we have done, making those thoughtful investments, both in our hospital settings, but also in primary care, in mental health, in all of the other ways that we understand healthcare.
Let's say I'm a healthcare specialist and you want to lure me to move to Alberta and maybe in Lethbridge here, a cardiologist. What would you do to entice me as a specialist to come to this region here, outside of the fact that we've got the beautiful coulees and Waterton Lakes National Park out of our backyard?
Well, one of the things we did was I did put together a new negotiated agreement with physicians, so the physicians have that stability and predictability with respect to compensation frameworks, with respect to some of those other questions that physicians often have. And I think going forward, a catheterization lab is absolutely necessary at the Chinook Regional Hospital. With the improvements we made to the hospital, we have shelled in those facilities, and as we go forward with the capital planning process, we will make sure that Lethbridge has the investments that we need to be able to take care of people right here in this city.
Now let's stick with healthcare for just a moment. Talk about the 2,000 extended care beds for our seniors. How many of those can we see here in Lethbridge?
I think that will be over time. We did receive some for the first 2,000 long-term care bed tranche that we made that commitment in 2015, and we finished that commitment. We are also seeing investments in continuing care here in Lethbridge. So for that step down, if you will, in terms of overall health care, but a supportive living facility for a new supportive living facility for seniors over on the west side. That's also a $10 million commitment on behalf of our province that we announced just earlier in March. So there's a number of different things on seniors care that we are doing. And Premier Notley, of course, announced last week that we would be covering prescription drugs as well for seniors, for the majority of seniors, for 4 out of 5 of seniors, to cover those co-pays, to make life more affordable and save seniors, some of them hundreds of dollars a year.
Let's talk about ARCHES now, the safe consumption and injection site. Many people, including Mayor Spearman, we've had him on the show before talking about what a difference it's making in our community. But then there are other people, the detractors, that say, you know what, it's bringing property values down around the neighborhood. The business owners are irate, they're upset about it because you've got a lot of these drug users hanging around and a lot of their customers are afraid to go into their businesses. So what do you say to those business owners to give them peace of mind?
Well, I've been working very closely with the business community in the downtown since 2015, and they asked me for a couple of things. One, stable, predictable funding to the municipality, and so that they could make sure that law enforcement had the resources it needed. We did that. We responded on the safe consumption site. The request for a safe consumption site came from a multi-pronged approach and a multi-stakeholder committee that included AHS, but also had with it law enforcement, first responders, city officials, and the business community. And so we put that in place, but we have also funded other associated services. So Intox is now being funded. Detox beds are now being funded. The city has collaborated with law enforcement to have a better law enforcement presence downtown, and I think that's really, really important too. Safe Consumption Site has saved approximately 800 lives so far. That is significant.
Are we just being an enabler though? Because I've talked to some families who, young people, they actually go to the site saying, I can OD and I'm going to be brought back with naloxone. This is wonderful. It's a better high for me. So are we just working as enablers, or is the proper counseling and programs getting out there to help a lot of those who are most vulnerable and in need?
This is an evidence-based way to save lives so that people can access those services. You can't access those services if you're dead. So, this has been the evidence-based response from healthcare providers to an opioid crisis that we've never really seen before, ever. These synthetic opioids are highly addictive. They evade law enforcement in ways that other drugs don't. They are a pernicious scourge across the prairies, but in particular in Lethbridge. And so the response has to be all of the things. It has to be a safe consumption environment. It has to be. They save lives. But also, too, we need to have investments in housing, investments in detox, investments in storefront mental health clinics, which is another thing that we've committed to in the platform, investments in youth mental health and addictions programming, and of course, as I mentioned, those intox and detox services. On top of that, our law enforcement officials need to be given the tools for the job. So that Ambassador Watch program has made a huge difference to the downtown business community, and I am so pleased that they've been able to get that done. I just met with the business revitalization zone for the downtown the other day. There are now conversations about having a BRZ for that east portion of the downtown so that those business owners can be better heard. I think that's a really good way to go about it.
So having the voices heard is wonderful. What else can we do to attract more business to the downtown core?
Absolutely. So, that was one of the things that in 2015, I sat down with the BRZ and I said, okay, how can I be helpful to you? And one of those ways was through housing and social services and so on, because of the social problems that we see manifesting themselves in the downtown. So I think we've been able to meet some of those. I think there's obviously more to do. Certainly pulling back on those on that progress is not going to be good for downtown businesses. Overall, I think making sure that we invest in housing so we can have some infill, so there's more folks in there spending their money, ensuring that we have new investments, like a performing arts center, for example. The province has committed $22 million to a performing arts center. And I assume that will be cited in the downtown. That's certainly what the city has said so far. So that's a good piece of anchor infrastructure. And over and above that, it's just a general economic development strategy, right? That we're attracting investments like Cavendish. We are attracting investments like an expansion to Richardson's Oilseeds. And we're doing that, we're allowing the funds for the exhibition to examine their work on a redeveloped trade and conference center, and investing in the airport as well.
Transport Minister Brian Mason was in town recently talking about the new bridge over the Old Man River, the $100 million, construction to begin in 2022. I'm thinking, Lethbridge is kind of a swing riding. We've got a lot of support for the NDP and the UCP. It's kind of like a two-horse race here in town. It's a real dogfight. What other pre-election goodies can we look forward to seeing here in Lethbridge? Outside of the bridge?
People have asked us about the airport. And I think that it is high time that Lethbridge had a redeveloped airport. The city has done a great job of attracting WestJet, and that's fantastic. We helped the exhibition do some further planning on a trade and conference center, and those two pieces of infrastructure, airport and conference center, is something that the business community has been talking to me about since we were elected. We funded the exhibition to the tune of $1 million. To kind of come up with their plans for that trade and conference center. I think that's a great thing. And now we're going to have more to say about the airport, because that's how you really grow the economy, not just for passenger service, but for cargo service, and grow Lethbridge as that agri-food and renewables powerhouse that we know that it can be.
But let me ask you something. We're going to see a lot of these pre-election goodies, infrastructure projects coming online, the support from the provincial government, but the deficit and the debt, it's out of control. How are we going to rein in that spending? What are we going to do? Where's that money going to come from?
Well,
to balance the budget
sure.
by 2023, 2024, right?
I'll dispute the premise of the question. None of these things are out of control. We have a careful and prudent plan to pass to balance that has been well articulated by Premier Notley, where we will come back into balance for at 2023. Jason Kenney has a plan that will bring us into balance at 2022. What's the difference between the two plans? There's scarcely a difference in terms of the debt to GDP ratio, or any of the operational budget. What's the difference? The difference is that Mr. Kenney will be blowing a $4.5 billion hole in the budget through the biggest tax cut in provincial history, which is a giveaway to profitable corporations. We are not talking about any kind of tax cut for small business. This is for already profitable corporations. And that's $4.5 billion. That spend far outpaces any of the careful and modest investments that Rachel Notley has said that we will make in healthcare, education, services, or infrastructure.
But don't those big corporations also employ thousands of Albertans?
They do. And you know,
Right.
it's interesting because the UCP platform doesn't articulate any growth at all from that giveaway. There are big fat zeros where there should be an economic uplift in their platform. That's the thing. It is an unnecessary spend when we could have the right priorities and invest in things that people have said are necessary, like healthcare, education, seniors care, and childcare.
NDP candidate for Lethbridge West and Minister Shannon Phillips, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thank you for having me.